The air was thick with tension as Marcus Johnson stood at the counter of Elite Motors, watching the white mechanic's dismissive gaze sweep over him. "We don't work on those old junkers," the man sneered, eyeing Marcus's weather clothes. "Try to shop down on Jefferson Street. They handle your kind of budget." At 58, Marcus Johnson carried himself with a quiet dignity earned through 27 years as a Navy corpsman with the Marines. His broad shoulders remained square despite the civilian clothes that had replaced his uniform 5 years ago. The small garage behind his modest home housed his true passion, diagnosing and repairing engines others had given up on. The scorching afternoon sun beat down on the luxury car dealership's lot as Richard Carter paced beside his stranded Ferrari 812 Superfast. The sleek Italian machine had betrayed him just 3 miles from the dealership, its engine refusing to start. "What do you mean you can't send anyone for another 2 hours?" Richard barked into his phone, his designer suit collecting sweat stains. "I have the governor waiting for me in less than 3 hours. Marcus slowed his pace as he walked past, his experienced eyes immediately drawn to the distinctive silhouette of the Ferrari. After being dismissed from Elite Motors where he'd applied for work, he recognized the owner as the same man who had watched silently during his humiliating interview. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus called, approaching cautiously. "Need some help with your car?" Richard Carter, CEO of Carter Automotive Group and owner of the largest luxury car dealership network in the state, turned in surprise. The irritation on his face quickly transformed to condescension when he saw the older black man in faded jeans and a simple button-down shirt. "That's very kind of you, but this is a high-performance Italian vehicle," Richard said dismissively. "I need a certified Ferrari technician." Marcus nodded respectfully but didn't retreat. "I understand, sir. I was a mechanical systems specialist in the Marines before becoming a medical technician. I've worked on everything from Humvees to helicopters. I might be able to diagnose the issue, at least." Before Richard could protest further, Marcus was already examining the engine with surprising confidence. "When did the problem start?" he asked, his tone shifting to professional detachment. Richard sighed, realizing he had little to lose. "It started making a strange noise about 15 minutes ago, then just died." "Did you notice any warning lights before it stopped? Any unusual smell?" Marcus asked, his hands moving methodically through the engine compartment. "Yes, actually. Something like electrical burning." Marcus nodded knowingly. "Your alternator's failing. See this connection here? It's causing a cascade failure in the electrical system." He pointed to a barely visible component deep in the engine bay. Richard leaned closer, genuinely surprised. "How can you possibly know that just by looking?" "Same way I could diagnose a wounded Marine in seconds," Marcus replied matter-of-factly. "Pattern recognition. Experience. This isn't my first Italian stallion with electrical problems." As Marcus reached deeper into the engine, the sleeve of his shirt pulled back, revealing a distinctive military tattoo and a medical alert bracelet. But what caught Richard's attention was something else, a military medal partially visible in Marcus's shirt pocket, its distinctive blue and white ribbon unmistakable. Richard's expression changed instantly. "That medal in your pocket, is that a Navy cross?" Marcus instinctively covered it, his expression guarded. "Just something I keep for good luck." But Richard's eyes had narrowed with sudden interest, his mind racing with recognition. That specific medal, with its distinctive marking, had appeared in classified briefings years ago, connected to a military medical program that had ended under mysterious circumstances. 3 days later, Richard sat in his penthouse office, staring at the dossier his private investigator had compiled. Marcus Johnson, 58, former Navy corpsman with the Marines, recipient of the Navy Cross for heroism in Afghanistan. But most intriguingly, former participant in Project Nightingale, a classified military medical research program that had been abruptly terminated 15 years ago. "What else did you find about his connection to Nightingale?" Richard asked the investigator on the phone. "Not much in official records. The program itself is heavily redacted, but I found something interesting. He was one of 5 medical specialists who filed a joint ethics complaint before the program was shut down. All records of that complaint have vanished." Richard's interest wasn't merely curiosity. Before building his automotive empire, He had served as a military liaison for defense contractors, working closely with programs like Nightingale. He remembered the whispers about its revolutionary medical diagnostic systems and the ethical controversies that had surrounded it. He picked up another phone, one rarely used. "James? It's Richard Carter. I need to talk about Nightingale. I think I found Johnson." James Henderson, retired 4-star general and current executive at Meridian Defense Systems, had been waiting for this call for 15 years. "Where is he?" The general's voice was tense with controlled excitement. "Working as a mechanic, of all things. Living quietly, keeping his head down." "Does he still have it?" Henderson asked. "I believe so. I saw what looked like the metal." "Watch him. Don't approach. I'm sending a team." The line went dead. Meanwhile, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, the Navy Cross medal before him. His niece Leah placed a cup of coffee beside him. "You've been staring at that thing for an hour, Uncle Marcus. What's wrong?" Marcus sighed deeply. "Someone recognized it today. First time in 15 years. Leah's expression darkened. "The car dealership guy? The one who wouldn't hire you?" "Yes, Richard Carter. The way he looked at it, he knows what it is." "Should we call the others?" Leah asked, concerned. Marcus nodded slowly. "Call Dr. Wilson first. Tell her Protocol 7. She'll understand." Later that evening, Dr. Elaine Wilson, former Navy neurologist, sat in Marcus's living room alongside 2 other veterans, all former members of Project Nightingale. "If Carter recognized the medal, he's connected to Henderson," Dr. Wilson said grimly. "We always knew this day might come." Marcus opened the back of the metal case, revealing a tiny data chip embedded in the metal. "Everything we documented is still here. The unauthorized experiments, the falsified results, the test subjects who never gave informed consent, and the deaths they covered up," added Commander Phillips, his voice heavy. "Henderson is still at Meridian," Dr. Wilson informed them. "They're developing next-generation battlefield diagnostic systems for the Pentagon, systems based on our stolen research." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "We swore an oath. First, do no harm. What they were doing to those wounded soldiers, testing experimental procedures without consent, I couldn't be part of it." "None of us could," Dr. Wilson agreed. "That's why we documented everything." A car slowly drove past the house for the 3rd time that evening. Marcus noticed, but didn't react. "They're watching already," he said calmly. Henderson never was one for subtlety. "What's our move?" Commander Phillips asked. Marcus looked at the medal in his hand. "We finished what we started 15 years ago. The truth needs to come out." What Marcus couldn't know was that Richard Carter was already facing his own moral crisis. The dossier on his desk now included disturbing details about Project Nightingale, unauthorized medical experiments on wounded soldiers, falsified data to secure billions in defense contracts, and evidence suggesting that James Henderson had orchestrated a cover-up that included the accidental deaths of whistleblowers. Richard stared at the phone, torn between loyalty to his former military connections and the growing certainty that he had stumbled onto something deeply wrong. The mechanic with extraordinary diagnostic abilities was much more than he appeared, and the metal he carried held secrets that powerful people would kill to keep buried. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the parking lot of Johnson's Auto Repair, the small shop Marcus had opened after being rejected by every major garage in town. James Henderson stepped out, his military bearing evident despite his expensive civilian suit. "General Henderson," Marcus acknowledged without looking up from the engine he was working on. "I wonder how long it would take you to show up in person." "It's been a long time, Chief Johnson," Henderson replied, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man accustomed to command. 15 years of looking for you and your friends. You've been difficult to find." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, finally turning to face his former commanding officer. That was the point. Henderson glanced around the modest garage. From saving lives on the battlefield to fixing carburetors. What a waste of your talents. "I still fix things that are broken," Marcus replied evenly. "Just not for people like you." Henderson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You know why I'm here. The medal and what it contains. The Pentagon's Inspector General closed that investigation years ago. Ancient history. Is it? Because Meridian Defense just received a $4.2 billion contract for battlefield diagnostic systems based on Nightingale research. Marcus's gaze was unflinching. Research that killed 17 soldiers. Henderson's expression hardened. Those men died serving their country. They died as unwitting test subjects, Marcus countered. They never consented to experimental procedures. Sometimes progress requires sacrifice, Henderson said coldly. Your bleeding heart almost destroyed a program that's now saving thousands of lives. By building it on a foundation of lies? Marcus challenged. Henderson stepped closer. I'll make this simple. The medal and all copies of the data. In exchange, you and your fellow whistleblowers get to live out your lives in peace. Generous retirement packages for all of you. And if we refuse... Don't test me, Chief. Henderson's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I protected this program from congressional oversight, media scrutiny, and military justice. Do you really think I'd hesitate to silence a few troublesome veterans? What neither man realized was that Richard Carter was parked across the street, close enough to hear their conversation through the directional microphone his investigator had provided. The cold calculation in Henderson's voice sent a chill through him. Later that evening, Richard paced his penthouse, the weight of decision heavy on his shoulders. His phone rang. Henderson, have you located the medal? The general demanded without preamble. I'm working on it, Richard replied carefully. Work faster. Johnson has made contact with the others. Wilson, Phillips, and Martinez are all in town now. If they go public with their accusations. Are their accusations true? Richard interrupted. A dangerous pause. Excuse me, the experimental procedures without consent, the 17 deaths. Are these accusations true? Henderson's voice turned to ice. You're a civilian contractor who was cleared for limited information. Carter, don't overstep. After hanging up, Richard made another call to Marcus Johnson. They're moving against you, he warned. Henderson just called me. He knows you've contacted the others. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked suspiciously. Because I've seen the preliminary reports on Nightingale. What they did, it wasn't right. No, it wasn't, Marcus agreed. And now Henderson is doing it again with Meridian's new systems. Same flawed algorithms, same dangerous shortcuts. Richard made his decision. I want to help. I have evidence of Henderson's involvement in the cover-up. Documents from when I was a military liaison. Why should I trust you? Marcus challenged. Because tomorrow at 10 a.m., Henderson is hosting a demonstration of Meridian's new battlefield diagnostic system for the Secretary of Defense. If what you're saying is true, more soldiers will die. The Meridian Defense Systems headquarters gleamed in the morning sun, its glass facade reflecting the American flag that flew prominently at the entrance. Inside the main demonstration hall, James Henderson stood confidently before an audience of military officials, defense contractors, and government representatives. What you're about to witness, Henderson announced, gesturing to the advanced medical diagnostic equipment on display, is the culmination of 20 years of research. The Prometheus system can diagnose battlefield injuries with 95% accuracy in under 30 seconds, allowing for immediate treatment prioritization and saving countless lives. The Secretary of Defense nodded appreciatively from the front row. Beside him, Richard Carter sat stiffly in his tailored suit, his expression carefully neutral. This technology, Henderson continued, represents American military innovation at its finest. Does it represent American military ethics at its finest too, General? The voice came from the back of the room as Marcus Johnson entered, flanked by Dr. Wilson, Commander Phillips, and Dr. Martinez. All wore their service medals prominently. Security personnel moved to intercept them, but Richard stood. They're my guests, General. I invited them. Henderson's face remained composed, though his eyes flashed with anger. Chief Johnson, this is a classified demonstration. You and your colleagues are not clear to be here. We were cleared for Nightingale, Dr. Wilson replied calmly. The program whose stolen research forms the foundation of your Prometheus system. Murmurs spread through the audience as Henderson forced a laugh. These individuals were dismissed from a predecessor program for insubordination. Their claims were thoroughly investigated and dismissed years ago. Marcus stepped forward, his Navy Cross medal gleaming on his chest. "Mr. Secretary," he addressed the Defense Secretary directly, 15 years ago, we documented unauthorized experimental procedures performed on wounded soldiers without their consent. 17 died. The evidence was buried, and we were silenced. Henderson's smile turned cold. Chief Johnson has had a difficult transition to civilian life. Many veterans struggle with... The evidence wasn't all buried, Marcus interrupted, removing his Navy Cross medal. With practiced fingers, he opened a hidden compartment in the back of the metal case, extracting a tiny data chip. Everything is here. Patient records, unauthorized procedure logs, internal communications ordering the falsification of results. Richard stepped forward with a flash drive of his own, and I have the communications between General Henderson and defense contractors discussing how to bury the investigation and silence the whistleblowers. The Secretary of Defense rose slowly. "General Henderson? This is absurd," Henderson sputtered. "These are disgruntled former employees making outlandish claims. The algorithms in the Prometheus system have the same flaws as Nightingale," Dr. Martinez stated firmly. "They prioritize speed over accuracy in certain trauma categories. Our projections showed a 23% misdiagnosis rate for certain combat injuries, potentially fatal errors. I've reviewed their evidence," Richard added, "and compared it to Meridian's current technical specifications. The flaws remain uncorrected." Henderson's composure finally cracked. Sometimes progress demands difficult choices. These men don't understand the bigger picture. In war, you can't save everyone. "Our job was to save everyone we could," Marcus replied quietly, "without experimenting on soldiers who never consented, without falsifying data to secure contracts." Military police entered the room as the secretary made a subtle gesture. "General Henderson, I believe we need to continue this discussion at the Pentagon." As Henderson was escorted out, his final glare at Marcus carried 15 years of hatred. "You've destroyed vital national security technology, Johnson. How many soldiers will die because of your self-righteousness?" Marcus met his gaze steadily. "How many died because of your ambition?" 6 months later, Marcus stood before a different audience. The grand opening of the Veterans Medical Advocacy Center. The converted warehouse now housed legal services, medical support, and employment assistance for veterans. When I returned from service, Marcus addressed a gathered crowd. I discovered that the skills that saved lives on battlefields weren't valued in civilian boardrooms. Many of us face that struggle. Our expertise dismissed, our experiences misunderstood. Richard Carter stood nearby, no longer the dismissive dealership owner who had once rejected Marcus's job application. The investigation into Project Nightingale had revealed Henderson's extensive corruption and led to multiple indictments. Richard's testimony had been crucial and transformative for him personally. This center exists because someone chose to see beyond prejudice and listen to the truth, Marcus continued. It exists because veterans stood together, and it exists to ensure that those who serve are never again treated as expendable. The center's first initiative was a job training program specifically focused on automotive technology, creating pathways for veterans into skilled employment. Elite Motors, now under new management after Richard sold a controlling interest, was among the first companies to join as a hiring partner. As Marcus finished his speech, he touched the Navy Cross now returned to his pocket, no longer burdened with secrets, but still carrying memories of sacrifice and service. "The true measure of our society," he concluded, "isn't how we honor veterans with words, but how we respect them through actions. Today marks a new beginning, not just for the center, but for how we recognize the value and dignity in every person who has served." If the story about overcoming prejudice and standing up for truth resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. We must respect every person who has served our country, regardless of their race or background. Remember that true character is revealed not by appearance, but by actions.